Hello everyone, it's Janet Quiring from HIN 620, and today I would just like to give you a brief presentation on why we need a diabetes registry and why a database is a good way to do it. First of all, let's understand that diabetes is a very, very big disease. And why do we need a registry? Because diabetes is a silent killer until people know their numbers. And what are those numbers? Those numbers are your fasting plasma glucose and your A1Cs. What that leads to is transparency of people's condition. And when they know the transparency of their condition, that leads to knowledge about their disease state. And what that leads to at that point for the doctor and the patient is accountability. An accountability with the knowledge and the transparency and people knowing how dangerous this disease can be, especially in a cardiovascular sense, that leads to change. Change in lifestyle, change in eating habits, change in health. So how do we do that? How do we get people to know what is going on? Well, we start with the diabetes registry. And what that is a collection of data of people's demographics, age, sex. We sort of went over a lot of that last week. Their fasting plasma glucose, their weight, their BMI, that type of thing. And the database starts with what you see on the left with all the data that goes into the registry on the back end from the database side. And what it translates into is a registry that you see on the right-hand side with the patient IDs, their name, their city, their demographics basically. And what we can do is we can run queries on these patients to see their gender, to see their A1C, and compare them over time to see if they're getting better or worse. This is why a database is so good, or a registry. And to maintain that, you need database administrators, and you need to assign people privileges to update the database, and you need to assign people backups for the database. You need to be able to assign people ways to do things to the database on the back end so that we can pull the data in the healthcare realm from the front end. So what we do is we create users, and on our database, if you can see on the left-hand side, there's a few users on there, but the ones that we're using for this particular diabetes database is the ones at the bottom: Window, Snapchat, Saver, and then there's Loser up there. And we created some privileges for them so that they can do some things to the database. And on the right-hand side, you can see where Loser has access to alter the database, manipulate the data, insert data, run certain reports, update the data, everything but to delete the data. And how do we do that? Well, we have to write code for that. And on the left-hand slide, you see a list of privileges that we can give users on the database, meaning the database administrators, the people who put the diabetes registry data into the database. And then on the right side, you can see the different select code or the different select statements in SQL that we wrote to create the users. The first one you'll see is Snapchat. The next create you'll see is Loser. The next create you see is Window. The next one you see is Saver. And we give them privileges, or we grant them privileges to update the database, to manipulate the data, to back up the database, which is totally something that we need in today's age. And this is how we did it. We wrote the code, which is on the right side, and on the left side, you can see what the list of codes are. And there are several, so that you can manipulate the data and know what you have access to. In order to do that, also, we had to create some accounts for the new users. And we created 4 new users, but we created 1 test account. And the 1 test account was for Snapchat, who would have been the database administrator. And as you can see, we created a test account for Snapchat, And after putting in the password, we were able to log into the test account for Snapchat. And Snapchat really only had access to one database, which is the Diabetes Registry, which is the DR, which you can see on the column on the left under the slide here for the test account. So the way we were able to create these users, again, was to write the SQL scripts for these users. And here's a little bit of a bigger picture of the complete one with all of the users on it. And we were able to assign them to the local hosts so that they would have access to the Diabetes Registry database. And what the last thing we did was we granted access for Mr. Saver to create a database backup. And the database backup was done with a data export. And we were able to save the database onto the laptop via export onto the desktop. And then what we did with the database was we were able to look at the script that the database is actually written in the code for SQL and compare it to what we actually typed in, which is on the right side. So the data that's in this database, the SQL script that the database is made in for the computer to crunch all this data is on the left, and then on the right you can see how we were able to put the data in the computer to create the demographic chart. So what you have here is a big registry for patients so that when they come in for each of their visits, you can compare their A1Cs and their fasting glucose, and there's other components of the registry that you can dive into and pull data and select data and compare it from one visit to the next. And the bigger issue and the biggest thing that we wanted to do with this database was to pull out and identify the patients who have an A1C of 6.5 or greater, because these patients are at the biggest risk of cardiac damage from diabetes and frankly just generally going into bad health as this disease progresses. So what the registry creates for us is data what we can readily pull from. As you can see, the gender for the males and the females and the A1Cs that we were able to pull out that were above 6.5. And we can zero in on these people, get them to the doctor, and have the doctor talk with them, have them meet with the nutritionist to change their diet, have them meet with an exercise physiologist to help them with their exercise, and just in general, perhaps change their lifestyle and gradually get them into better health. So this is why we need a database registry. This is why we built this database, so that we can pull this data, and this will help everyone who has type 2 diabetes. Thank you for your time and attention, and please, if you have any questions, contact us.